Hey everyone, I'm Will and welcome to another video. This one is a critique session and I'm giving feedback and advice on images submitted by some of the people in my Facebook Academy. So thank you so much for everyone that submitted. We've got quite a few images to go through, so I'm going to do these in a few separate videos. Now, of course, when you're giving critique, this is all obviously quite subjective. And I want to first and foremost say that these are wonderful images, and please don't get downhearted by any of this critique. These are just little adjustments to make to hopefully take your photography to the next level. So with that said, we'll get into it. We're going to run through these images and I'll make different adjustments, and you'll see hopefully how small adjustments can all add up to give big results. Let's take a look. We have some wonderful images here to work through, as you can see down the bottom, but we will kick off now with our first frame by Angela. This is a really nice, pleasing image, an intimate scene. We have the lovely fall colors and quite a clearly defined main subject here with this large tree. And what I particularly like is the compositional balance. The tree is leaning to the left. So the tree has actually been positioned right of center. It leans us into the frame, into this centralized zone, which is nice and balanced and harmonious, compared to, say, if the tree was put in the center and then leads us out of the frame. So compositionally, I think this has been executed pretty well in that regard, and I love the simplicity of it. It's a very calm, beautiful image to look at. From a critique standpoint, there's not too much here jumping out at me, except this lower portion. I feel like this area, you know, this lower half is taking up 50% of the frame. Now, it's nice to have some of that opening down there as basically a breathing space, but I think that might be a little much. I think if I was out in the field, I would have said, let's just shoot it from here up. That way we still get this open space, which gives us a sense of depth and, like I said, breathing space. But I don't know if we need all that lower half. That is more or less the only critique I have, just because this lower half, there's nothing going on there and there's a lot of chaos in the background. So if you were able to just capture that a little tighter, even if we just try to not quite 4x5, 1:1. That's probably the comp I would have ran with. Now that's a square. You're most likely not shooting a square ratio. So even if we did this as a standard 2:3 ratio and just readjusted in the field, I think that there just still gives us the whole idea of the image and the same feeling, but we've just got rid of some of that empty space down the bottom. But otherwise, Angela, I think it's a beautiful frame. Well done. And yeah, just a tiny little bit tighter on that bottom half. And yeah, I think you've got a beautiful image and probably made the most of the location and the scenario. We'll move on to this one now from Brian. And a really nice looking image. What I like here is the sense of depth with the layering. We've got a nice ridge line in the foreground. This progresses through a little further into the distance. Now we've got the bay, and then a hint of land back here. Multiple layers progressively getting further into the distance. That's how you create a great sense of depth. All right, now critique. I think, you know, my first thought is, okay, where is my eye meant to be finishing up? And the composition does basically finish us down here at the bay, that's fine. That's good. It's effective in that regard. I guess my only kind of downside with that is there's not much there as the final focal point or subject itself. Yep, we've got the bay, but I'm looking for just something more. You know, I like how we've got this sea stack here, but that's just getting a little lost. It's a little bit far away. What would we need to make this better in that regard? Well, if you think of the four pillars: location, composition, light, and processing. The location and composition work pretty well. Processing, yep, done a pretty good job here of what you've got. I think it's the light which is letting this one down. And what would have been fantastic, obviously, is, you know, being here when there was some light coming in and hitting somewhere down here, hitting the water, putting some hues somewhere in the frame, and then we would have had something a bit more pleasing and more natural resting place for the eye. And at the moment, because we don't really have much light, everything is the same value, so it's hard for us to know exactly where to rest. We're almost hunting around for that final resting place. Now, one of the hard parts with critiquing is when it comes to light in particular, often people might feel slightly defensive and say, well, this is the light I was given, and that's 100% true. But in order for us to get better photographs, it's just a matter of going out and working with the best light possible. Now, I think you've probably made the most of the scenario. So if I'm going to critique and judge it on what you had on the given day, I think you've done a pretty good job. Potentially slightly tighter. One of the things here with this type of composition is the balance. We've got a large shape here on the left with these trees, but then here we have the open space. So there's a slight imbalance and a lot of grey cloud up there. So I'm wondering, you know, if it was just shot a little tighter, we're still going to have the imbalance. We can't do much about that. But even from a processing standpoint, if we then maybe darken a little more of this zone just to help balance things out, but also push the eye down to here. I'm also going to now darken slightly down this foreground area. And I'm doing this now to make the bay appear a little brighter. And I'll bring the whites up now on there like this. So we're just basically dodging and burning, but we're doing it to help bring the eye to that water. With this cloud in the sky as well, I think just globally, the whole image could be slightly cooler. It might be more pleasing on the eye, leaning into that direction. Something like that. I like to zoom out just to have a little look at where I'm at, putting a bit more vibrance in here. And you can see now that bay just has a hint more light, and I'm putting this light into the sky, the cloud, so it looks more natural. We don't want it just randomly hitting the water, so the cloud is also slightly brighter. If we just do a bit of a before and after, that's what it was, that's where it's going. So I think if we had to work with what we've got, cooling it down, darkening the edges, brightening the center to help the eye want to rest on that bay instead of scanning around. So it's a tonality thing too. Like I said, when we've got that same tone everywhere without any highlights necessarily. Moving on to this frame by Chantel, an area I know very well, and indeed she was with me on a workshop when she captured this. You've done a fantastic job here. This is just such a spectacular image. I love the strong sense of balance. Look at this symmetry with the mountains converging in, Milford Sound. But everything here has just been executed so well. And from a processing standpoint, I really like the darker tones up in the cloud, which would have been helped amplified in processing, similar down in the water. So we have dark to light, near and far, a lot here to lead the eye. So what's the feedback? Not much really, to be honest. I think it's a fantastic image. Maybe we could help bring some more detail and separation into the mountains, particularly on this side. And one way we can do that, because I can see the granite here, you've got plant life and then the granite, even these waterfalls back there, just by lifting the whites and the highlights. So I'll use a brush, as I always do, and I'll just do this a few times so you'll see the difference. So I'm just going to run that along, even going through here, and then I'll push K, get a new brush, and I'll do it again. Even a small, very small amount of clarity will also start to lift. Basically, I'm grabbing anything that's slightly lighter and making it even lighter again, so it separates off the dark tones. So let's turn these on and off, before, after. See how it's just now going from very flat mid-tone. You can see your histogram rising as well. So just getting a bit more definition out. Tonal separation is one thing I usually call it. Even on this side now, so I've got the whites. We don't want this waterfall to be too bright because it will somewhat defy logic if it's extremely bright. And really, the brightest area should be in these clouds. And even up here, see this one up the top there could be a little brighter. Just a few pockets. You always get those little highlights come through. Just a bit more dodging really, just to make it less of one giant mid-tone. Similar to what I did on Brian's image, the previous one. And I am curious if we just cooled it down a little, just a little more, about there, not much. All right, let's do before and after. That's what it was. That's where it's at. Not much, but I think it just helps give it a bit more luminosity, a bit more light and tonal separation, so we're not so flat in there. But overall, really well executed, compositionally fantastic. We're on a boat here capturing this, and although I do my best to work with the boat skipper to line up some of these compositions. It's a lot easier said than done, especially when it's rainy and windy. So this is just fantastic. Like I said, the sense of balance, and even if this was printed large, one of the best bonuses is how everything is actually converging and flowing, and there's the waterfall right down the back there. Well executed image and well processed. Wonderful stuff, Chantel. And it was a pleasure to have you over here on the workshop recently. All right, we've got this one captured by Chris. Lovely stuff, mate. You know, I've always just based images off that initial feeling and response, and the initial feeling and response here is wow, beautiful, just pleasing. So a few good key components. We've got near and far for sense of depth with the ferns in the front. Then we have in the midground these trees which are slightly further away, then the water, and then I love how we've got this mountain range in the back, clearly defined resting point for the eye, perfect lighting with that side light, a wonderful sense of balance. We have the mountain on this right hand side, we've got mountains on the left, even space of clouds all the way through, so no big gaps in the clouds, just a lot here to really enjoy. From a critique standpoint, I would say maybe this lower part of the fern probably wasn't needed, so potentially just adjusting your perspective more to get rid of that. It would look fine, just start beginning the frame here, and we'll crop it in a minute to see how that looks. The other part, and I know this would have been hard depending on all the factors, but a touch more separation from these trees, basically getting the lens higher. Getting the lens higher would have eliminated that one in the foreground, and then it would have got these trees lower, so we just have a bit more breathing space with the water in the background. It even would have potentially helped get this tree off the mountains. Now, you may say, look, I already had the camera above my head. It was impossible. That's very well and true. It's the hard part with critique when you're not really there. Another thing is maybe if you step to the left slightly, big step to the left, if you could have maintained that foreground to some degree, but then stepping to the left would have put these trees maybe more here, and that would have helped fill that space. This one would have left the frame, but then we might have had more of an opening in the middle where this mountain is. So just a few little compositional adjustments in this one. And we could, and you might want to try this, a 16 by 9 just to get rid of some of that foreground. Something like that, potentially. Like I said, I don't think it needed that lower part, but the other part, which we can't really fix in post, was, yeah, just a little higher to get us some separation here. It is separated, which is good, but just a touch more would be nice. These trees are almost a bit of a roadblock for the eye to really getting through to that background mountain. Overall though, mate, really nice image, but that's probably the main general feedback on that one. Still some wonderful work though. Well done. Christopher has put this one through, and I like the concept here of leading us through the woods and out into the distance, and there's quite a few layers here which are nice to take in. The water, the grasses, water again. One of the main tips here is there's probably a little bit too much happening in regards to what's the main focal point, and do we need so many of their other elements. The main area that I can see Christopher's trying to lead us to is this little island in the distance, which I think that's a good idea. But I think it's probably been a little over cluttered with these. It's nice to make a natural frame with trees and branches, but when there's so much and many close to the lens, what starts to happen is you get a few out of focus, like these ones here. And these look like they were either moving in the wind, or I don't know if you've done an exposure blend here, whether you've dropped in a different sky or you've done like a HDR blend, but you're getting a lot of ghosting, so that's where you're getting these edges soft and semi-transparent, even up here. So it's something to keep in mind. Like I said, I don't know if it's because you put in the clouds potentially, or you've just maybe done an exposure blend like an HDR, which you shouldn't have to do anyway, because the light doesn't look that dynamic. So I would say just keep in mind less is more, and sometimes it's nice just to have a little bit more breathing space. So you can build out your layers, but just make sure that we're not getting too cluttered in there. And generally trying to have things in focus, I think, is a bit more pleasing on the eye than being softer and less in focus. With the processing as well, I don't know if you've shot this in RAW, but there's a lot of noise up here. So maybe it was JPEG and you've just gone a little bit heavy on the processing. I'm not entirely sure, but just dial it back slightly. So I would say the concept here is correct with building out the layering and a bit of a natural window, somewhat a clearly defined subject matter, but just dial it back a little, strip it back and find that happy medium of having your layering. Maybe it would have just been nicer and more pleasing on the eye to get away from some of these woods and just show this water, if you could have, semi-reflective water, then the grasses, then the island, and then some sky. Food for thought. I like the concept. Definitely keep it up and just pay attention to why some of that ghosting may have occurred. The last one here for today's session is from Dylan, and I was with Dylan for this one on a workshop. It was a really special moment. These trees are fantastic, and I've gone past these trees for years and never captured them because they never had the right conditions. What the conditions required were some fog, and we got that on this particular morning, and Dylan will probably recall how excited I was when I said, quick, we've got to go get these trees while this fog's here. And it didn't last long. We had about 2 minutes, and then the light kind of came through, and you can see that light starting to come through here, and the light just burns off the fog. My main feedback, mate, would be from a compositional standpoint, I wouldn't mind the tree just being slightly to the left more. So the first image we looked at, we had the tree far to the edge, and then it leaned us into the center of the frame. Whereas this one, I'd say you've almost got it a bit too close to the center. So I feel like we're getting pushed away from the center here. So to correct that, if we just had the tree slightly to the left, which would look roughly like even that, to be honest. Now I know we're losing some of our foreground and things, which isn't great. But even if we just did that, I think it just balances out more. So this tree has a huge lean to the right. So put it further to the left, so it leans us and keeps us in that centralized part of the frame. So I'll just go back to the original, which is there. The only other part though, from a processing standpoint, is we're just lacking some actual light and natural light entering in the frame, some luminosity. If you look at your histogram, this is one big mid-tone and it's on the darker side of things, but we can see that there is some light, especially up here. I can see light hitting these trees. You've basically recovered the light a little too much, in my opinion. So what I would suggest doing, using the brush, I'm just going to, and I might even darken everything down together like so. And this will now allow the light to shine. So for the light, I'll bring up some exposure, some whites. I'll use a big brush and then just use the edge of the brush to introduce this light coming in. I'm using the edge of the brush so it's way more subtle. And I've got some control over how it's just bleeding into the frame. Why am I bringing it in from the right? Well, that's just naturally where the light is. So you work with what nature's provided, and we're just boosting that light. So if you look at your histogram now, we do a before and after from that before. That's where it was. That's where it's at. So hopefully you agree that that's just suppressed too much recovery, and now bang. So give us an indication of where the light's entering in, particularly when light actually was entering in. So we're not really making something out of nothing. And now that's probably getting a bit too much. So I would dial that one back. Something like that anyway. And even some of that light, maybe just down in the immediate foreground area, bring the whites and the highlights up. You've also probably just recovered down here a little too much, some of these guys. So we don't want everything. We've kind of done this on a few images, even Chantel's one at Milford, where it was just a little too flat and everything becomes a mid-tone. So it's just trying to get that tonal range and separation in the mid-tones. So I'm running everywhere now. So I think it's just looking more and more natural and standing out better once we introduce some of those brighter values. So we don't just look so flat in those darker zones. They're still dark, but now we have some depth there. So before and after, that's where it was. That's where we're going with it. Beautiful image though, really nicely done. And all of the images, just generally some minor adjustments, but those little minor adjustments make for some pretty big results. All right, thanks again everyone who submitted the images. We've got lots more on the way, so I'll get on to making the next video shortly. Like I said at the start, these are all subjective. Everyone's going to have their own opinion on these, but these are just some of the little adjustments that I would look at making on images like this. So hopefully you got a lot out of it, guys. Thank you as always for the support of the channel. If you're interested in maybe submitting images in the future, just become part of my Facebook Academy, and that's for those who have maybe purchased some of my tutorials. So there's a link below that will take you to my tutorial website. But enough of that, I just want to say thanks. I hope you're enjoying the YouTube channel. I love helping you guys with your photography, and I'll see you in a video soon.